So, for many recruiters across Australia, Ross Clennett needs little introduction. He is one of the industry's most recognised voices. Ross has spent 3 decades in the recruitment industry as a recruiter and a leader, as a coach, a speaker, a podcaster, an author and a commentator. With close to 1,000 weekly blogs to his name, Ross has helped shape industry conversation for years, asking the hard questions, challenging the status quo and, of course, celebrating the wins along the way. In 2022, that contribution was recognised with the RCSA CEO's Outstanding Contribution Award. Most people know Ross for his sharp industry commentary, but today we want to go behind the opinions, the blogs, and get to know the person that is one of Recruitment Australia's most recognised voices. Welcome to our Brisbane office, Ross.
Thanks, Sam.
It's like this is your life.
It is.
Nice to be here.
Oh, it's good to have you. I'm going to tell you, we are very nervous about this conversation of all the people we have spoken to. And we have had some very interesting people in here, but we were saying for someone who does such a good job with your own podcast, with all of your commentary, we have been terrified about today. So let's see how
knowledge
we go.
of the industry.
All of your knowledge.
But I guess today we really want to get to know you and share with the audience. The recruitment industry will follow your blogs and all your updates and everything that you do. But I think people want to know who are you, who are you behind all of that. So today would be nice to dive a little bit deeper.
So should we start with that? Where did you grow up? What was life before that, stepping into recruitment in London?
Well, I grew up in Hobart, so I was born in Hobart and grew up in suburban Hobart. I've got 3 younger sisters. Well, sadly, one of them's deceased now, and we'll talk about that later, no doubt. And my father and my mother were both public servants. So my father worked for the ATO as a tax auditor for a long time, 3.5 decades, and my mum was a swimming teacher. So I had a fairly ideally what you might call standard middle-class Hobart upbringing until my dad got a job with the Fijian government. And so at the end of 1976, we all shipped off to Suva and for grade 6 and grade 7 in 1977 and 1978, I went to school, local school, not an international school, in Suva, along with my sisters. So that was probably, definitely the sort of most significant event of my young life.
What was that? I didn't know that.
No idea about that.
What was that like? How long did you say you were there?
2 years. So
2 years.
All of 77 and all of 78. Yeah.
And were you say year 5 and 6?
No, year 6 and year 7.
6 and year 7.
So the last year of primary school, first year of high school.
So my son is that age now, and I'm just picturing uplifting him. How'd you find it?
Oh, just like kids just adjust, and I just adjusted. I mean, you can imagine coming from mid-1970s Hobart, everyone looks like us.
Yes.
And I'm in a school in Fiji where I'm an ethnic minority.
Yes.
And it's ethnic Fijians, so Melanesian Fijians. You've got the Indian Fijians, and then you've got a lot of mixed race kids, and then you've got a lot of expat kids. Well, not a lot, but some expat kids. So Australia, New Zealand, and the UK.
How did that impact your life, do you think?
I just accepted people for who they were. And as a kid, like, my friends weren't the other, white kids, basically.
Yeah.
My closest friend was a Sri Lankan kid. And I just accepted it, and we went about life, although we lived in what you might call an expat suburb.
Yeah.
But at school, you just got on with life and you treated everyone as you found them.
Yeah.
And even just moving from somewhere like Hobart to an island, like that in itself must have...
I mean, the climate was one thing, but the ethnic diversity.
Have we ever checked in? Are you in any way related to our Hobart team? Are all of the team down at YDJ?
Maybe.
I bet you all went to school together and you all shopped in the same places. I'm sure Justin would know.
And did you go back to Hobart?
Yes. So once Dad was offered an additional contract, but because of where the 4 of us were in our schooling, Mum and Dad decided better to go back. So we went back and, beginning of 1979, I started year 8 back in Hobart with, quite a few of the kids that I'd been in primary school with.
And I think I'd read recently about, when you went to university, you were interested in theatre. There was a competitive sport element as well for you, politics. Talk to us about all of these interests and how they maybe led to recruitment.
Yeah, sure. They all had an impact. So final year in Fiji in 1978, I played Willy Wonka in the stage version of Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. So I was on stage and I quite enjoyed it. And then when I went back to Tasmania, I got involved. I did speech and drama at high school, and then got involved when I went to college, because in Hobart, Year 11 and Year 12 is at a separate college unless you go to a private school. Yeah. So, and I was in the government school system. So in Year 11 and 12, I go to Rosny College. I get involved in what's called the Rosny Performing Club. I meet one of my life's mentors, Simon Hurst, and so I get fully into theatre then. And then when I go to university in 1984, I then really get into the old Nick Company, which is the university theatre group. So I'm on stage all the time. I get onto the committee. I'm president. So I'm spending way more time and learning way more getting involved in theatre than the lecture halls and the tute rooms of the economics department.
Yeah.
Could have had a totally different life.
That's right. But I was clear I didn't want to be an economist. So so I'm just doing the degree mainly so I can keep being involved in theatre, and and then I got involved in student politics. So I was on, I can't remember how I got drafted into the union, and then the president at the time, a guy called Charlie Tauber, said to me, do you want to run for president? Because he said, I don't think there's anyone else in your cohort that's up to it, but you are. And I'm like, oh, okay. So in 1987, I ran for president and I was elected. And so 1988, which was the first year of tertiary fees, now known as HECS. It was then just a $250 administration fee. So that was the first year. So I led a student protest down at Rest Point Casino because the ALP were having their national conference, and the ALP were in government at that point. And I was interviewed by Ray Martin on the midday show about that whole student protest.
Have you still got footage of that?
I think Mum's got it somewhere at home. I certainly have never looked at it since the late 80s, but I'm sure I've got it somewhere.
Deal. I was just going to say that would have been massive.
So I guess that having a strong point of view sounds like that's always been within you. Like, did that really develop in those years?
I'd say so, yes. Learning to stand up for or to represent the students with the university administration. I mean, to be fair, I certainly found them good to deal with. The Vice-Chancellor and the business manager and the head of the professorial board all treated me respectfully, and I like to think I got quite a bit done on behalf of the students because I was able to negotiate. But I was 21, turned 22 while I was student union president, and all of those men, because they were all men, were all, at least between 50 and 65. So I learnt how to deal with people significantly older than me and people who obviously had a lot of authority.
How did you have confidence to do that?
Probably the theatre helped me.
I was just going to say that the theatre was pretty good.
Probably theatre.
And not knowing any different, I guess.
Yeah, I suppose, if I wasn't going to do it, there wasn't anyone else. So I kind of forced myself into those situations to prepare and make sure I understood what the point it was that I was trying to get across, and obviously be respectful but assertive so they understood that I wasn't going to be pushed around.
So then recruitment in London, how do we go from economics, theatre, student union, like all of this, and then is it like everyone else, we just fell into recruitment?
And I guess growing up in Hobart but seeing a little bit of Fiji, like did you always want to get out?
I just remember in the final year at uni, everyone's going on the campus interviews, which I was. But at that point, I was quite keen to be a journalist because I'd had a week's work experience at ABC News in, I think, year 11.
And you'd met Ray.
And you'd been interviewed on TV. Yes. I could do it better.
I could do that.
And I had applied for a ABC radio cadetship. So they had 15 cadetships nationally. And I got selected for an interview. And when I got selected, I found out that I was one of 90 that was interviewed for the 15 slots out of 3,500 applications. Wow. So I went through the process and I was interviewed by older listeners would remember Neville Oliver, who was the head of ABC Sport, and he was a Tasmanian. So he interviewed me, and unfortunately I didn't get to the next stage, which I was pretty disappointed about. So one of my mates who was finishing medicine and actually was born in Germany but raised in Hobart, he was going back to Germany to do his final year of his medical degree, or the internship, basically, part of it. So like a 4-month placement maybe. Yeah. And he said, well, why don't you come? So I said, sure. And so we flew to Hong Kong and went through by train through China, Mongolia, and then got on the Trans-Siberian Express and then went through to London, and he then went to Germany to start his placement, and I landed in London with one person I knew at about $1,000, and I was spending my pounds like dollars.
Yes.
I thought, shit, I better get a
Yeah.
job.
Yes, it goes fast. Yeah.
So this mate of mine who I'd played cricket with, he invited me to this party on the second night that I arrived in London. And I said, oh, where are you working? He told me. I said, how'd you get that job? He said, oh, this recruiter, she's Kiwi, here's a name. So I called her on Monday.
And were you like, what's a recruiter?
Oh, no, I knew that. I knew because as the student union president, we'd used a recruiter to help help recruit a role actually at the union. Yeah. So I had some understanding, but what I didn't understand was that was the only way really you got a job in London if you were an Aussie or a Kiwi. You basically had to go to an agency.
Because we both did that. And I remember not knowing what that was when I
had no idea what a recruiter was.
Yeah. Well, so I went in. Alison was her name, and we were talking for a bit, and even though I completed an economics degree and I had intro accounting, I couldn't do accounting, and this was accountancy personnel. Yeah. And she's like, oh, I think you might be of interest to my boss because we're looking to hire people as recruiters. And I'm thinking, what's this? Yeah. Anyway, our boss comes in, Terry, and we get talking, and would you believe, not only is Terry an Australian, not only is she a Tasmanian, not only is she from Hobart, she's from the same suburb of Hobart as me.
Oh, my goodness.
Oh, just like, what?
That's
anyway.
Classic London, though.
Yeah, it is.
You're never far from anyone that you actually know.
It's a classic London story. So we get talking, and she's like, oh, I think you'd be a good recruiter. And I'm like, oh, okay. And she explains the job. Like, literally, this is my third or fourth day in London. I know nothing about London. Yeah. I've never worked in an office. Like, I'd had a job at a Mitre 10, so I'd been a retail assistant. Yeah. And at 22, I don't know anything about anything, really, except I had this confident, deep voice because I'd been a thespian. Yeah. And I had this kind of Aussie confidence, I suppose. And
you needed to make money.
Well, I did. And they offered me, I think it was £7,000, and I also got an interview and then an offer with Kentucky, but not to go out on the buses, but to be a rep at the hotel. So where the buses left from in London to go off to Europe with everyone, and when they came back. So this was sort of like a concierge role, basically. But that was like £6,500 with no commission, and the other job was like 7 with commission. I'm like, oh, I think this commission thing sounds like, because I'm looking at how expensive London is. Yeah. I'm going, I'm going to have to earn some extra money somehow. So that's how I took my first job in recruitment with what was then accountancy personnel, and subsequently renamed them as Hayes.
And did you plan to stay and work? Or, you'd been on this big travel journey. Was it just a little stopover to head home? Or was
I was thinking I'd stay 6 months.
I mean, obviously, to accountancy personnel, I'm here for life.
Well, they were realistic about Aussies and Kiwis, and at that point you could get a 2-year working visa. And although you're only meant to work for half the time, no one policed it. So, as long as you left by the expiry of your visa, they were fine. But it was really how I just realised very quickly my pounds just weren't going to last long, and I needed to work. And when people were saying they were working in a pub for like £2 an hour, I'm like, that doesn't sound very. That doesn't sound very good.
That was my thinking.
Did you?
That was the same. I got straight away when I got into recruitment because I was like, that is not going to.
Yeah, I got into sales too because I remember leaving home going, I'm going to work in a pub. I'm going to do the whole English thing, and then I got there and went, oh no, that won't work.
Yeah, no.
So what was recruitment like in those days? And I mean, I think about my time there like 20 years ago waiting for the timesheets to come on the fax machine, and you were a couple of years before that. Like, What was it like?
Well,
And what was the same, I guess, too?
And where in London were you based?
So I was working in what was called the Victoria office, which was near Victoria Station.
Yeah.
So we were on the ground floor, and right next door was this takeaway shop. So the wafting of the takeaway into the office. So people could smoke. So people were smoking in the office. There were no computers other than the receptionist had a word processor. So on our desks you had the resumes of the candidates. So typically each person had like 15 to 20 candidates. So there was only such thing as active candidates. Like there wasn't a database as such. And then there were these lever arch files of jobs. And the way AP operated in London, there were 3 separate areas in London. And each of those areas, your office was part of an area. So typically 6 offices was part of the area. And you had access to the clients. And what access meant was their phone number. And the only way you could get interviews was to call up and book them in. Like you didn't send resumes.
No.
Because although there were faxes, that wasn't really what people did. The whole thing was you've got a job and the job gets called in because, of course, there's no email.
No.
So the client calls in, the consultant picks up, and like there's no reception. It just goes straight to the consulting area.
Yes.
Consultant picks up, it's a job. You could tell by the consultant asking questions, it's a job.
Are you fighting for the phone?
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Like it's a race to the
phone.
phone.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So you're talking to the client, you're writing down what the job is, you're quickly looking at the candidates you've got, and then you segue from taking the job, I've got someone, and then the moment that the client accepts this is permanent accounting recruitment. Mm-hmm. So the moment the client accepts the interview, then everyone else, their ears prick up. The client's taking on the phone, which meant the client was happy to book in interviews without seeing resumes.
Yeah.
So the whole point was the competition wasn't the other recruitment agencies, it was the other AP offices. The whole idea was to try and book up the client schedule with all the candidates from your office.
desk.
Yes.
So no other office could get the interviews booked in. So it was very Darwinian.
Yes.
Did you love that?
Well, I didn't know anything else.
Yeah.
Because I imagine some people would walk in and go, what is going on? Or you're like, this is exciting. And
Well, I found it exciting. What I do remember is the first time that I saw a fee get made, a placement get made, and the consultant whips out her calculator and she calculates what the fee is, and she goes, I don't know, £2,000 fee, and I'm going, ooh, that's all very commercial.
Yeah.
It also very raw.
That'll pay for a good trip somewhere.
Yeah.
And it was, again, I didn't know any better, so I just. I kind of fitted in, I suppose, but I was really struggling. They were pretty brutal. At the end of 3 months, if you weren't making placements, you were gone, and I was really struggling. And I think I made 3 or 4 placements in the last 2 weeks of my 3 months, and I saved my bacon.
Yeah.
So if that hadn't happened, who knows? I'm sure I wouldn't be sitting here talking to you both now.
With where we've got to today and all of the tech that we have available to the recruiters now, what are, I guess, the lessons from those early days that we can draw on now so that we don't lose, I guess, the craft of recruitment?
Well, I don't know if this is quite answering your question, but what made that job so simple was there was nothing else to do other than be on the phone. Okay,
Yes.
you interviewed a candidate if they came in. There was no such thing as client visit. You didn't need to go on a client visit because the jobs came in on the phone and you booked interviews on the phone, you negotiated the offers on the phone. So I think I'm right in saying I worked there for 19 months and I went on 2 client visits. Mm-hmm. Everything was just on the phone. So the whole thing was if your manager looked at you and you weren't on the phone,
what were you doing?
What were you doing? Because there literally wasn't anything else to be doing.
And you could smoke inside. There's no reason to go out. Out for a break. You're
what you learnt was just frantic activity, just on the phone, just calling. And the whole thing was booking interviews. The only thing each boss was interested in was how many candidate-client interviews you booked that day. And the goal was to get 6 every day.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because you think of people, you hear all the time of sending a CV or waiting for the client to see what they think of a CV. Mm-hmm. And I remember you training me and having that same thought of that client is on the phone, if you know them well enough, we know this is the right person. So let's get the interview booked before a CV goes anywhere.
Absolutely.
And sometimes the client would call me and say, Kate, you forgot to send the CV because you had the trust with the client, you know, and you just knew it well enough. So I think probably with, to your point, with all the maybe tender requirements and tech and things, that it's more, there's a lot of flicking.
Oh, and a candidate would come to reception, a consultant would interview that candidate, and the goal was to have the candidate wait in reception, not go to another recruiter. So this is permanent recruitment. This is not temp recruitment. Yeah. And then you'd walk back out and you go, I've got this great candidate, you know, what jobs? And you just get on the phone and you try and book the candidate 2 or 3 interviews in a row. Yeah. So hopefully by the end of that day, when the candidates walked in, there'd be an offer. There was no such thing as second interviews. That's not accurate. But it was uncommon for second interviews. I'm just placing accounts clerical people. So you really don't need a second interview. It's typically first interview, candidate does well, client goes, yep, great. And like you could turn around a perm placement in 24 hours.
And so you'd have a waiting room full of candidates then? Would there be a few people there at one time, or wait, that person's gone off for their interview, what's happening with me?
We were a smaller office, so it'd be inaccurate to say it's a waiting room full, but certainly typically there's maybe 2 or 3 people there. Yeah. But the head office, or the big office, were the city offices, because there was much more work there. We were in Victoria, which was less corporate. It was more SME, really, compared to the banks and everything, which were the city offices.
Yeah. So then, Ross, you mentioned there you were in that role for 19 months. Did you then head back to Australia? Was that at that point? Were you deep in recruitment?
No, I went to Africa, so I took, I don't know, maybe 2.5 or 3 months. I went and did a safari in Africa and came back to Australia via Perth. So one of the guys who I'd worked with in London he's Irish. He was marrying a girl from Perth, so I went there to their wedding. And I had to phone my parents and ask them to put money in my bank account, because I arrived back literally broke. I had literally no money. Mum, Dad, could you put $200 in my account? Yeah. So thankfully they did. And I then flew to Sydney, and one of my mates from Hobart, from uni, had started a job at AMP, and he was in a share house in Balmain. So they kindly put me up. I was on the floor, and one of my mates from London, a guy called Ben Wood, who subsequently became the managing director of Clicks IT Recruitment, he was working. He'd been in Hayes, AP as we were then, in the same office as me in Victoria, and he had then followed his girlfriend Liz, who was a girl from Brisbane, on the temp desk back to Australia, and they're subsequently married, kids, still together today.
Yeah, wow.
I spoke to him yesterday on the phone, actually. And so Ben was working for Greg Savage. He'd started with AP, and then he and Liz had then moved to what was then known as Accountancy Careers. And so I rang Ben. He said, my boss, Greg Savage, might be interested in talking to you. I think I can get you an interview. So he got me an interview with Greg. And then I also met the heads. There were joint managing directors of, well, they were still AP, accountancy placements in Australia. They weren't Hayes then. And so I went to see them. So I had then 2 interviews, and it was quite funny because at AP they were very down about the market. Like Australia then, it was like 10% unemployment. Like, it was very tough. And like, I've come out of London, 2 years experience to the same company, like, I'm sorry, we don't have a job for you. Can you imagine that happening these days? Yeah. And I'm like, and because they're like, we think the market's going to get worse, and so I'm sorry. I go to see Greg. Greg's like, look, the market's shit, but I think it's going to get better, and we've actually had someone leave on our Sydney temp desk for accounting. Are you interested? And I'm like, okay, great. So I finished up taking the job with Greg, and as it turned out, the guys at AP were right. The market got worse, and Greg was wrong. Too late. I'm working for Greg.
Yeah.
Talk us through that. What was that like?
Working for Greg.
Yeah. The industry obviously knows him very well.
Yes. Well,
what was that like?
My first boss was his now wife, Bronwyn. So I worked for Bronwyn rather than directly for Greg. I only worked for Greg subsequently, because when Bronwyn left, I got promoted into Bronwyn's job. So for the first 4 years I'm working for Bronwyn on the Sydney temp accounting desk. And as I said earlier, like unemployment 10%, and it rose. So I think I'm right in saying that late in 91 it got to 10.8%. So it's like pretty dire. And like London, you're just on the phone all the time. I mean, again, there's no computers on our desk. It's the old lazy Susan with the 4x6 index cards. So the consultants, you're picking that up and you're looking at the phone number and you're calling to try and book a meeting. So it was just BD. It was just, I mean, when I look back now, I go, wow. But at the time, it's just what you did. Again, nothing else to do. You can't look at emails or go online and research anything. It's just the phone's there and you just pick it up and call.
You mentioned earlier about a lifelong mentor, and I think Simon Hurst mentioned. Are there other mentors that you've picked up along the way throughout your recruitment career?
Well, the before, Kim in London, that was my first boss. Kim, she was amazing because she could tell I was homesick. She said, use the office phone to ring home, even though I'm sure that was against company policy. And, she'd have me over, cook me a meal, and she was just so lovely, so lovely. I don't know how she made it into recruitment because she was so nice. So I'm very clear, without her big sister approach to me, I'm pretty sure I wouldn't have lasted. So I owe her a lot. And then Bronwyn, who I've mentioned, she's such a fantastic role model. Still the best temp recruiter I've ever seen. Just masterful. She was gorgeous. She still is gorgeous. And she could have just used, her good looks, but she was so smart. She had all, because in this, we're talking early 90s in Sydney, we're accounting, most of the clients are men. And she just had them wrapped around her finger, very commercial. I mean, I'm sitting from Bronwyn about as close as I am to both of you, and just hear her on the phone, taking a job, fill a job over the phone with a candidate. And she was so positive too. I mean, these were really tough times, but she wouldn't get down. And we had so many laughs. So Bronwyn was fantastic.
How incredible 2 years in to have that sort of exposure as well, and that sort of coaching and training so early in your career. That's amazing.
Throughout the whole time, whether I've, as a recruiter and interviewing people or coaching people and hearing about people's stories of terrible bosses, I think I've been incredibly fortunate. I certainly have had some not great ones, but by and large I've had outstanding. And most importantly, particularly early on, having Kim, having Bronwyn, and then Greg. I mean, Greg, very different personality, but definitely the boss I needed at that time. So those four people I'd say have been the most significant people in terms of moulding me, and apart from my parents, but in terms of professional people, definitely those four.
So how long did you stay recruitment on your recruitment desk? You stepped into Bronwyn's role. How long was that?
So I took over Bronwyn's job, must have been mid-95 or into 96, and then the company listed on the stock exchange in must have been late 98, and they asked me as part of their expansion plan to... so I was running Sydney Temp, so there was, I think, maybe 16 recruiters, and we had temp accounting and temp business support, and they asked me to go to Adelaide and set up recruitment solutions in Adelaide. So I flew, having just gone on honeymoon, and my then wife was, we found out pregnant with our son, who just turned 27 last week. And turned up in Adelaide. Never have visited South Australia, and I've turned up in Adelaide to start a business or start an office.
Newly married with a baby on the way, starting an office.
Yes, that's right. So our son was born in the August of 99, and I'd started the office. Must have been the January of 99.
Well, having the perm experience in London, the temp experience in Australia, do you believe in hybrid recruitment desks? Do you think you need to specialise in one or the other?
And is one person
And is one better for you?
Well, my experience is you absolutely want to specialise as temp or perm, and I appreciate in some markets that's a little bit more difficult, but certainly when I'm working with owners, my view is you should always be working towards desk specialisation. So yes, maybe a desk starts as hybrid, but you really want to be planning for it not to be in the future, because to me, everything I've seen shows me that you are always going to underachieve on a temp desk, because with perm, the sugar hit of the big fee is very attractive, as well as it just takes up a lot of time. And my experience of temp recruitment and what made me a good recruiter and the other people in our team, Temporary Solutions, was you've just got to be proactive. You've got to be, because you hopefully take and fill a job quickly, which means you're always on the lookout, you're looking to create opportunities. So like floating a candidate, going out on meetings, like the number of times where I'd pick up the phone, I'd call someone, they go, "Oh, Ross, I was just about to call you, I've got this job." No, BS, they were about to call me. BS. If the Michael Page consultant had called, they would have said exactly the same. It's just you've got to be there when the opportunity arises, and that to me is what I saw as why ultimately it's much better, much more profitable to have dedicated temp desks and dedicated perm desks.
Were you more of a perm or a temp recruiter?
Oh, temp. I was a pretty average perm recruiter, but a very good temp recruiter, and I really enjoyed it because London perm was like temp in Australia.
It really was, wasn't it? That was my experience too, and that the way you spoke about the pace, that is how I was trained to work in the UK. It didn't matter whether it was perm or temp, it was the same. It was done in the day.
Oh, London was just like, I mean, Sydney was like a sleepy country town compared to London. It really was.
So then coaching. What was the point, I guess, where you decided to make the move from, I mean, you were in leadership roles.
And what were you doing at that time?
Well, it was kind of forced upon me because Greg left Recruitment Solutions, and one of the non-executive directors was then appointed the managing director. And he was an accountant, and he was not in any way, shape or form a salesperson or a recruiter. And how can I say this diplomatically? I don't think he really understood how the business worked. And he looked at what I was earning and what my peers were earning, and he thought we were all well overpaid. And so then he went about either making people redundant or making their lives miserable enough that they wanted to leave. And how it came back with me is he said, I don't think you're doing good enough job. Sorry, there's a bit I missed. So after my Adelaide experience, I came back to Sydney because they wanted me to run effectively the whole of Sydney. So I came back to run the whole of Sydney, which was accounting, business support, sales and marketing, and banking and financial services. So I've been back a pretty short time, and then I think it was hardly even 6 months, he decided I wasn't up to the job. I'm going to advertise your job. You're welcome to apply for it if you want. So I'm like, well,
Okay.
I'm like, well, that ain't going to happen.
Yeah.
And from a point where 6 months earlier, I'm thinking my future set, we've gone public, I've got these shares, and I could see the next 10 years. And then he's like, I don't have any confidence in you. So it was pretty messy, and we negotiated an exit, and it was all pretty upsetting. And then we decided, as my then wife and I, because our son was then about 21 months, and our daughter had just been born. So this all happened in the sort of the May, June, and our daughter Nikki had been born in the April. So we then moved to Melbourne because that's where her family was from, and moving to Hobart wasn't practical. And so, middle of 2001, we moved to Melbourne, and it was like traumatic,
really tough time.
Like it was really difficult because I thought my future was set, and then it wasn't. And I'm sure many people listening to this would have had some sort of similar experience where suddenly there's a change of boss, or circumstances within work means that what you thought was going to happen, or what you thought your future was, just it wasn't that.
And then when you've got a young family to support, and it's very stressful.
Oh, I mean, absolutely it was. So So then I moved to Melbourne, a city that I've always enjoyed, but I had no connections, clients,
there,
candidates or anything like that. But again, Ben helped me out because he was working for Tony Bedison Group, which included a business called Sachs Consulting. Andrew Marty, who's still the owner and managing director of that business, hired me as a contract recruiter there. So I then started there, and like a week or two later was when the Twin Towers were hit. So then Ansett went under, and Ansett was a Melbourne-based business. So it was just chaos. You know, suddenly the economy's grinding to a halt, and I'm trying to get a desk underway in a new market. It was like very stressful.
So then was that the opportunity to step into the coaching? How
No,
did that
I then
evolve?
moved and worked. So I'd stayed with Andrew maybe about 8 or 9 or 10 months, and I moved to work for Jeff Slade at Slade Group, where, again, very different culture. And I was there for maybe a year, and then I bought a coaching franchise, a business called Mars Venus Coaching, and that was a very bad decision. It was a lemon, and basically lost all of my money. And Jeff pretty much said, you can have your job back, but because I'd already stepped out and become self-employed, and I'd only been out for 8 or 9 months, and this thing just fell over, or I could see it was just a turkey. And then I thought, well, I've kind of lost everything. Oh, sorry. And then my marriage was over. So I'd lost all my money. Like I'd lost my dream job. I lost all the money I had, and my marriage was failing. I'm like, well, I'm kind of at the bottom. I've got nothing left to lose. I might as well keep going with self-employment. And that's where I started with training.
What a time. Like, had you ever thought at that period, I could do this myself in agency?
I never had that serious thought, Kate, because I didn't really have a network in Melbourne. And the reality was I wanted to be a more active father. And I knew that if I was going to start my own agency without really any foundation clients, it was going to be a lot of hours. And at that stage, Guy was 5, Nikki was 3. And I'm like, I just don't want to do that. And I just felt training was going to give me a bit more flexibility in terms of hours. And at that point, there was only sort of 3 recruitment trainers, David Carman, John White and Gaynor Lowndes. And I thought, well, there's room in the market here. And so that must have been 2004, I think.
So how did you turn that lemon into lemonade? Because when I'd approached you and you did some work for our business, God, nearly 10 years ago, like it was a well-oiled machine.
Yes, it was at that point. Well, I had support from a couple of people who knew me at Recruitment Solutions. So Jan Kavanagh, who runs Optimum, she owns Optimum Recruitment in Victoria. She was very supportive, so that absolutely helped. And then the big break was getting in with the RCSA. So I ran an interviewing workshop, and based on the feedback from that, they could see I knew what I was doing. And then I effectively became the main trainer at that point because David Carman and John White were really doing their own thing. Gaynor wasn't really doing anything for the RCSA, or very little. And so I became the trainer. And now there's a number of trainers for the RCSA, whereas it was kind of just me for probably until Sophie turned up.
Really
I think it was pretty much just me for maybe 4 or 5. Oh no, probably more. 5 or 6 years maybe.
And so even to think about your agency career to that point, where was the training coming from for you? Was it always from your leaders? How had you been trained to date?
So at AP in London, my very first day was training day, and then the next day you're on a desk and you're working. So my training was all just watching people.
Are you coming into a warm desk? Was there a pile of CVs on your desk?
Warm desk, the most overused phrase in recruitment. So then at Recruitment Solutions, we had a very good training culture. So Greg was very big on training. So we had weekly training on a Thursday morning, 8 till 9, 8:30 to 9:30. And they were very forward. So we were videoing role plays, and so that was part of your induction, to watch a video of a role play of a client meeting or an interview. So we were, this is, near 30 years ago. I think even now the standard would hold up. Like, it was very, very good. And then when I was promoted to lead and I said to Greg, okay, so who's going to do the training? He's like, well, you are. And I'm like, oh, I've never trained people. He said, well, just train them like you do recruitment because you're, effectively the best in the team. Like, oh, okay. So
you have the theatre background to do the role plays.
So I just remember starting with, okay, I better write a list of kind of like my principles. So literally that's how training started. I just wrote all of these things, kind of like my mantras, if you like. I mean, one was, remember, a client becomes a candidate can become a client, so treat everyone as a person, not as a label. And so I just developed, of course there were some modules, but very temp specific. So I developed stuff from there. So that helped me when I went out as a trainer, even though there was not any of the collateral. I didn't have the sense to copy anything. So I had to dig into my brain to kind of remember it all, and then created it from there, and then just gradually tried to improve it every time.
Did you enjoy the process of building all of the material?
That's a good question. Did I enjoy it? I don't really remember thinking anything other than, well, I need to do it, like creating workbooks and slide packs. But because of my theatre background, I was very conscious of it's much better if you're engaging people. Like people just sitting there nodding, looking at slides, that doesn't really work. So none of my training sessions were slide packs. I won't say none. Mostly it was people with a workbook and I'm on a whiteboard and I'm getting people to do exercises because I felt people were more engaged if they were looking, speaking and writing. And that, I think, is what helped me sort of get the feedback that I got, because people felt engaged. As we all know, recruiters don't have a particularly long attention span.
No, not at
so
all. They're like,
you have to make it entertaining as well as educational.
That's right. What do you think genuinely makes a high-performing recruiter? Are there certain traits?
Yes. Oh, yes, absolutely. So this is part of my leadership program. So motivation competencies are what you would call them technically. Others might call them traits or attributes, but they're the things that are most hardwired, the things that are hardest to train or develop. So Daniel Goleman wrote about this in Working with Emotional Intelligence, that there are these core, well, there's three that he listed, but I've added a fourth, which is kind of a subset of one. So the first one's achievement drive. So achievement drive specifically is striving to meet and exceed a standard of excellence. And any top-performing recruiter, they're their own harshest critic, because they're always looking at the scoreboard. They're always looking at whatever the target is, I want to meet it. And as part of that, they're looking internally first. They're not blaming circumstances or others. They're like, oh, that offer got turned down. What did I miss? And reflecting and trying to work out what the lesson is there, rather than, candidate's greedy. Like, you're not learning anything there. So to me, that's critical. Team commitment. So recruitment's a team game. Absolutely. Yes, there's an individual scorecard, but we rely on our teammates. And I learnt that particularly at Recruitment Solutions, Temporary Solutions, seeing the teamwork and how great our team was. Third is initiative and optimism. So don't dwell in the problem. Yes, there's all problems, but that's what we pay for, to solve problems. The client's got a vacancy. It's no point, they're not near public transport, or they've got a shit reputation, or whatever it is. It's like, well, that's just a problem to solve. So how are you going to solve that? And then the final one, which is kind of a subset of achievement drive, which is really a coachability or learning ability. Like, you've got to be able to take the feedback. You've got to learn quickly. And you've got to have a level of cognitive ability appropriate for the recruitment that you're doing. Like, you've got to have smarts. Because I've hired people who, on paper, with degrees and whatever, look like they've got the smarts. And yes, they've got the academic smarts, but have they got the cognitive ability for this job? No. And that's why having a degree is absolutely no guarantee of success in recruitment, because you look at some people who don't have degrees, they're amazing, and some people who have degrees are amazing. So it's not about what you've got on paper, it's kind of that street smarts, commercial smarts.
I guess, how long do you think putting someone into a job, you say you interview someone and they might look good on paper, and then not everyone's going to love it as well. How long do you think in the current market it takes to know whether someone's got those attributes and really is in the right spot?
Well, the way I explain it in my training, or the way I teach it in my training, is a pyramid. So from day one, you see those motivation competencies. So it doesn't matter whether they have any KPIs. You can see achievement drive or not. You can see team commitment or not. You can see initiative and optimism or not. And when I'm training leaders, I'm saying that's what you've got to look for, because that's the raw material, and that's not going to change. So if you've got someone consistently coming in late, someone who's not really paying attention or not taking notes or not asking smart questions, I'm sorry, they're all the indicators you need to say this person's not going to make it. So on top of that, you then build what I call team behaviours. So that's the culture of the particular team. What are the standards? So for example, in Sydney Temporary Accounting, our standards were we have an 8 o'clock vacant job meeting. Everyone's got to be ready to go for that vacant job meeting. We don't keep candidates waiting more than 3 minutes in reception, and a few other things. So these things that we are proud of that have us be a high-performing team. The next step in the pyramid is skills. So you've got to build skills. Next step beyond that's activities, high-performance behaviours, so whether it's prospect calls or interviews or whatever. And then the final one is results. And where most leaders in recruitment fail to understand the potential of the people, or mistaken, is they just look at the results. Now, the results, they're the lag indicator. The lead indicator is the behaviour. And so for me, it's a very long answer to your question, but for me, you've just got to understand you're looking at those 4 motivation competencies right from day one, and what are you seeing there? And to me, there's no problem at the end of first month saying to someone, I'm sorry, you're not going to cut it, because you've seen enough of those 4 competencies in the behavioural standards across those 4 weeks to go, no. Now, just because they've displayed them doesn't mean they're an automatic yes, because they've got to go up the pyramid. Yeah. They've still got to produce the results. But
it's the foundation.
But where most owners or leaders fail to adequately decide is they don't look at those things. The person in month 5 or month 6 is still not producing the results. Maybe they're a nice person and they go, maybe a bit longer. No, I promise you. Because what mostly happens is the consultant gets to month 11 or 12 and either they leave because they're failing or they're finally exited. And the leader goes, oh, God, why didn't I do that 6 or 7 months ago? And that's typically what happens.
Got to be close to them, don't you?
Completely.
Yeah.
Observing performance, is very, very important. When you watch a coach in a sports team, what are they doing? They're watching performance the whole time. And yet in recruitment, one of our major failings is we expect the billing manager to do too much billing, and that takes away from observing the performance of the people around them. And I literally mean sitting in on an interview, going out on a visit. That's how you know how good they really are. Or not.
Let's talk about the billing manager for a while, for a moment there, because that is one of the really tough roles in recruitment. And we talk a lot about, the biggest biller becomes the manager by default. What makes a great billing leader? And do you have a couple of tips that you would give to a billing leader to say, this is how you can succeed?
Yes. So the most important thing is to recognise the 3 critical time allocations you need to make. So firstly is billing, secondly is managing, and third's leading. So as a billing manager, you are, or you will have, responsibility for fee production. So in my experience, the best thing to do is to make that as visible as possible. In other words, it's almost like a training session because you're modelling everything you want your team to demonstrate. So stand up in the middle of the consulting area, make the calls so they hear you do the things that you're coaching and developing and holding them to account for. That's the first thing. Secondly, the distinction between leading and managing. So the way to think about it is this. Leading is extrovert time and managing is introvert time. So managing to me is when you are typically either with a piece of paper or a screen, and you are looking at the planning, you're reviewing. Okay, so I've got a one-on-one with Kate tomorrow. Okay, let me bring up Kate's results. Okay, let me look at the notes from our last discussion. Okay, what are the key issues? So you're thinking about all the things that need to happen in that meeting with Kate. Or, I've got a meeting with my boss Sam the day after, I better prepare for that meeting. So introvert time is time you should do away from the consulting space, because you've got typically confidential information on a screen or a piece of paper. You don't want people to interrupt you, so you should be away from everyone. You should be in an interview room, boardroom, at home, at a cafe, whatever, because you don't want interruptions, because you can get way more done without the interruptions. You don't want people walking behind you. You don't want to be listening to conversations and thinking, bloody hell, and you're distracted because you're hearing something, you want to intervene, or someone, hey, Ross, blah, blah. No. So you go off the floor to do time devoted to managing activities, absolutely critical. And leading activities are your extrovert time. So you're with the team, you're leading a vacant job meeting, you're out sitting in on an interview or with a client meeting, you just, Kate, what's going on this afternoon? Like, you're with your people.
Piece,
so you're looking at a human. In leading time, you're always looking at a human. Managing time, you're looking at a screen or you're looking at a piece of paper or doing something like that. So to me, a successful billing manager will understand they are three separate things, and they will allocate the appropriate amount of time to each of those three things. Then critically, they then do the things that are required for the required amount of time under each of those categories.
And the four traits, motivators that you spoke about for a high-performing recruiter, are they the same for a high-performing leader, or are there extra?
Well, there are additional things. I mean, Goldman, in working with emotional intelligence, his research demonstrates that any organisational individual success, you could say the research effectively proves that those are the critical motivation competencies. Now, leadership behaviours, there needs to be other things on top of that. And the most important thing is spending time with your people, because firstly, you want to know what they're doing. You want to know how well they're doing it, and what the things are that they need to be working on to take them to the next level. And you can't take the person's word for that. Like, you have to know. And the way you do that is observe behaviour. So you have to dedicate time to observing behaviour. And that just takes up a lot of time. Like, there's no shortcut for that. You have to dedicate the time. And to me, and that's a leader anywhere. That's not just recruitment. But more important in recruitment, simply because when you lose a job, there's no runner-up check. You get nothing. And so you want to be recognising potentially those small things. So a small thing, inverted commas, might be, have you checked the likelihood of a counter offer being accepted? Now, an offer may be lost and the job may be lost simply because the recruiter did not do that. And being aware or being close enough to the recruiter to ask questions or listen, like, to me, that's absolutely critical. And I think, there are other things, but to me, that is the single most important thing.
So then, how is work from home?
I was just about to ask that. I was like, what's your thought there?
Yeah.
Very tough, because of course you can't observe behaviour. And that to me is why certainly in a recruiter's first 6 months, they shouldn't be working from home. Like, you have to be observing their performance.
And the leader too, to be in.
Yes. And to me, that makes it incredibly difficult for a leader to have more than one day work from home, because one day, absolutely, all that stuff under managing, the time devoted to managing, yes, you can do that at home. But being with your people is the most important thing, because a consultant's description of what happened is no substitute for observing and hearing what happened.
So I guess maybe there are some businesses out there that work predominantly work from home model, perhaps. What advice would you have for them and their leaders to, it's not ideal from your perspective perhaps, but what could they be doing to make sure that they are? How do they observe?
If it's almost all work from home, that's just incredibly difficult. Like, of course you can say, can I be on a Teams call with a candidate? Of course you could do that, but that's just very, very difficult. And that
it's
model,
so planned, isn't it? You lose the ad hoc.
yes, that's right. Just the overhearing, which to me is what I just found so valuable. And certainly when I was leading a temp team, we're all very close. So of course you're not hearing every conversation, but you're hearing many. And that, of course, is lost in work from home.
It's the speed too, isn't it? Like you might hear that someone might have missed an opportunity because they were at home and there was a discussion in the office where they moved quickly on something.
It's that teamwork.
But you can't actually, the collaboration happens on the spot. And
That's right.
You don't want to not loop someone in, but there was just no time to loop someone in perhaps. So
Particularly temp and contracting.
Yeah.
Like, I just cannot see how you could successfully do that. Well, let me reframe it. There are so many opportunities that are going to go begging because everyone's working from home, and you'll just never achieve what's possible with a desk if you've got all the recruiters working from home. It's just too hard.
So let's switch up to writing blogs.
Mm-hmm.
So I remember when you started writing blogs. In fact, it was all a go-go in the industry, and a lot of people said, I wrote a few and they're now gathering dust. But you have continued to sustain that. Almost 1,000 blogs, weekly
Very
blogs.
consistent.
Why did you take up the creative outlet? And maybe that's when you said you were interested in the journalism.
Yeah.
And why have you kept going?
Right. So the first the beginnings of this was writing for Leslie Horsburgh's Recruitment Extra.
Yeah.
So I contributed a piece in 2001, and then she asked me for other things which I continued to produce, and I maybe wrote 8 to 10 pieces across the life, maybe more. And then when I set up rossclennett.com, I engaged a marketing coach, and so this is 2007, so although now, nearly 20 years later, it sounds kind of obvious, when we were talking about how I was going to get myself out there, he said, well, given you're an infopreneur, was how he described it, that people are going to find you before you find them. In other words, because of the way people search, they will come across you and form a view as to your credibility and whether you might be someone that they're looking for to help them, training, coaching, before you talk to them, and you want people to conclude that you know what you're talking about. So he said the best way to do that is blogging. And he said, do you like writing? I said, yes, I like writing. And he said, well, to be a successful blogger, you've really got to publish at least once every couple of weeks. You could probably get away with once a month. And I said, well, I like writing. I'll try for once a week. So when I published Insight for the first time in late September 2007, that was the first one, and I just kept going. I just set myself that goal of writing every week, and I never run out of topics. So that was the beginning of it, and it's sort of changed a little over that time, but the core of the weekly blog has remained. And also the coach asked me, what do you want to be known for? Like, it's important that you're clear what you want to project in your writing. And so we had the conversation, and I'm like, well, I want to be factual, I want to be opinionated, I want to talk about recruitment. And so we kind of workshopped that. So I got a personal brand identity through that work that helped me as I was writing.
And that being opinionated, I'm thinking about like over the 20 years now, there's so much more commentary that people give in terms of when you're putting yourself out there and writing these blogs, and particularly if you're taking a strong opinion. Does it ever bother you when people don't agree with those opinions? And have you ever formed an opinion that you've later gone, well, that wasn't right?
Well, one of the things I pride myself on is being factual, and so I do spend a lot of time finding the facts and then writing my opinion around the facts. So I'm proud of the fact that I've never had to pull a blog. Yeah. I've never had to substantially correct a blog. Yeah, certainly from time to time I've had to tweak a few things. I've only received one defamation threat. One written defamation threat. Right. There's been a few verbal ones.
Yeah.
And the only blog I pulled was a blog where I wrote a pretty scathing assessment of a CEO. Yeah. He subsequently left that job, and he contacted me a few months later to say, people, when they Google my name, your blog comes up and it's really impacting my job search, and, you know, would you consider doing something about that, because that's financially really hurting. And so I said I'd think about it and call him back. And so I thought about it. And even though I absolutely stood by what I wrote, and I still stand by what I wrote, I called him back the next day to say, look, I'll delete the blog because it wouldn't sit well with me that what I've written, regardless of how accurate I think it is causing financial distress for someone. Yeah. So I deleted that blog, and that was probably about 9 years ago. And I have had some pretty irate people call me, but ultimately, you know, I think the fact that, you know, I've never had to pull a blog is probably, I'd like to think, a good indicator of how thorough I am with what I write. And I know people read it because they like to read my opinion. It's clear when I look at the things that get the views, it's typically all the blogs where I've excoriated some person or I've dissected a company as to why it's performing so badly. So I know that's why people read it. People can read anodyne stuff anywhere. And clearly in the age of AI where people can get stuff written for them, I want people to read my stuff and go, well, AI certainly didn't write that. That's, you know, that's Ross. I can hear his voice in what I'm reading on the page.
Is that quite hard? You know, if I think about, you just mentioned they're building a personal brand, and your marketing coach was talking about building credibility. You know, we certainly talk to our team about that and trying to show that you know your market and you have value to add.
And your own voice.
But they certainly shy away from it because it's difficult to stand up and have an opinion, and they might do some research, and they're on the phone to the clients and candidates every day. They know their stuff. But to put it out there that you know your stuff and to have an opinion on it feels incredibly hard. I guess, what advice do you have for people who might want to do more but shy away from it?
It's kind of like, don't worry about what other people think, because everyone's going to have an opinion. And I realised that pretty quickly. It's like, the major reason I write is for my own satisfaction. And when people have asked me about blogging and what advice I would give, the number one piece of advice is you have to write for yourself. Because if you're writing for views or comments or feedback, you're going to stop writing pretty quickly. And the major thing that drives me is it helps me synthesize my thoughts about what I'm reading and hearing. So great, it's finding an audience and people like it, but I'm always doing it for me. And I know if I'm writing something and I'm uninspired, I'm like, well, this is not going to be a very good blog because I'm not feeling it. And I'm sure my audience are going to recognise that. So my advice is, don't care what anyone thinks. Remember, it's going to be rubbish to start with. You're going to get better, because I look back at some of the stuff I wrote at the beginning and I'm like, you will just get better. And that's the discipline of every week me pumping out 800,000, 1,200 words. Now, of course, I'm not saying recruiters need to be doing that, but it's just the discipline of whatever amount of words you want to do. Just remember, you will get better, but you've got to stick with it.
In terms of, I guess you mentioned earlier, like dissecting loads of businesses, you're a judge and many awards. What are the best agencies out there doing really well right now?
They specialise, and the advantage flows enormously, because if you specialise, that means that when you're assessing candidates, there might be 10 candidates that kind of, their resumes may all look the same, but because you specialise, you understand which are the top 4, because you know the questions to ask, or the team, the recruiters, you know the clients. So that means that when you put those candidates forward, you're recommending them. You're not just go,
what do you think?
Here, what do you think? So when you recommend them with confidence, clients are much more likely to go with your confidence. You're much more likely to brief the candidates more effectively. The interviews are likely to be much better. When someone's offered a job, they're more likely to accept it and start and perform at a high level. Fewer drop-offs. All of that, all those small advantages at each point means you are going to be way more profitable than most other recruiters, because the biggest area where most agencies are missing out or lacking is they do too much work they don't get paid for. And so when you specialise, you maximise the likelihood you get paid for the work that you do.
And And I think, what are some things that recruiters perhaps need to be doing more of?
Well, they could always be doing more business development.
You know, I guess apart from the agencies doing really well at specialising, but what are the good teams doing? What do recruiters need to be doing? Yeah,
there's so much conversation around it's a tougher market now. We've come off the COVID high and we're seeing a load of agencies go into administration and it feels harder.
And to your point, back then there was nothing else to do but get on the phone. There are so many things that they could do now. There's almost too much choice.
Well, I'm biased, of course, because I'm in the business of producing news, but I think knowledge, like my experience is I don't think enough recruiters are interested in acquiring more knowledge about their sector, like having better, higher quality conversations with candidates and clients, I think can elevate you because most recruiters aren't that good. So if you're prepared to put in a bit more effort, and that's the feedback I love to hear about, well, mainly Recruitment News Australia, because it's only 20 minutes a week. And, you know, and I get feedback from people, it's like, great, because I ask the team to listen to it. It's only 20 minutes. It's just these hits. And then we might talk about something that might be relevant for our market. It's like, great. So to me, that's low-hanging fruit. And most recruiters won't. Well, they don't recognise the value of that. They're not interested. I don't know. Maybe it's because I did an economics degree and I've always been, you know, my experience in Fiji and living in London, I've always been interested in the wider world and many recruiters just aren't. They're a bit too sheltered in terms of the things that they think about and they're interested in.
But if you think about as well, sometimes people being scared to get on the phone or not having the confidence to do the job, that knowledge will help. You know,
completely.
If they could be listening to your blog, Understanding Recruitment Better, and then find a sector specific blog for what they recruit in, or a podcast that they could just, you know, that's an hour a week, and it would just help them have something else to say.
Yeah, precisely. I mean, I said I'm completely biased because that's in the business that I'm in, but I just see that as a pretty obvious thing. And it doesn't matter what market you're in. Like literally, it doesn't matter whether you're in construction, blue collar, pick and pack, medical, engineering, construction, like literally it doesn't matter. There's always extra that you can know and it's never going to be a disadvantage. You just never know when it can help you.
Ross, what are you optimistic about for the recruitment industry? You know, we're hearing so many conferences around we're going to be replaced in AI and the transactional recruiter, all these things, but what are you optimistic about? Oh,
I still feel incredibly optimistic about the recruitment industry. When you think, I think it's an incredibly important industry because if we help our clients and candidates get better jobs faster, then that's helping the economy. That's helping companies become more productive. So I don't think there's any world in which recruiters cease to exist. Where I do see the big difference is the recruiter who's been like a 5 out of 10 and have been able to make a reasonable living in the last few decades, that just is not going to happen in the future. Like even within the next 5 years, the 5 out of 10 recruiter just won't have a job. The standard by which you need to operate at to be an effective recruiter is going to go up to 7.5. And the mediocre, maybe that's not the right word, but you know, the average just won't have a job. So I see there being proportionately in the workforce maybe fewer recruiters, but the standard of the recruiters will be higher and they'll earn more money.
I was just going to ask about Recruitment News because you co-host the podcast with Adele last. You've mentioned that a couple of times. Where did podcasting come in, and I guess what does that add that's different to the writing piece for you?
So we started, Adele approached me at the RCSA conference in Hobart in September 2022. I've got this idea, news podcast, whatever. And I've got to say, I was a bit ambivalent at the time. It's like, I'm already pumping out a weekly blog. It just sounds like more work.
Yes.
Or, is it the same but in different format is perhaps the thought, And
I'm like, okay, so I'm not committing to it, but let's do some trials, not publishing. Let's see how it might go. So we did probably 6 months of just trial runs, like beta tests, I suppose you might call them.
We probably should have done those. I said to Kate, we're going to do a podcast sometime, and she came in the next day and said, I've lined it up. We've got a studio. We're going next week. Oh my God. So we were like...
That freaked me out.
Yeah, it freaked me out too.
And you're fast.
I was more concerned about how much time it would suck up. But, to Adele's credit, she was very clear about it. She said, no, it's got to be short. I said, Most podcasts are too long. I reckon 20 minutes is maximum. I reckon we have half of news and half of a question of the week. So the format that is today's format is the format we agreed very early on was the format that we would have. And we agreed, okay, we're not going to swear. We're going to be a little bit more formal. And we just want it to be recruitment specific. Yes, there's a few more HR things, but we just wanted to make it quite targeted. But it's quite time consuming. It's 20 minutes, but I'm responsible for preparing the material, and it's probably 3 hours of preparation. And then the 20 minutes in terms of, we normally have 2 hours of recording to get the 20 minutes. And then Adele spends, an hour, hour and a half, maybe 2 hours sometimes on the production side. So the whole thing for 20 minutes is 7 to 8 hours a week.
It is a commitment.
Yes, and when you're doing it weekly.
Weekly, yes.
And consistently.
Yes, consistently.
That's the impressive part for me of all of what you're doing is the consistency piece, because it's hard.
Yes, and my consistency in producing the blog had me clearly understand what I was up for, and that's why I was so reluctant to begin with. I'm like, I'm already spending this time with the blog. And again, now I'm charging for my blog, which we'll get to shortly. But
so let's maybe go there. You announced just last week, actually, which was fantastic timing, really, to actually talk to you. A really significant change for you.
Yes.
Talk to us about what's happening.
Well, I turned 60 in June. And
60?
I turned 60 in June, yes.
Oh, my
Happy
goodness.
birthday.
You look fabulous for 60. Happy birthday. When I read that, I was like, you must be 50.
Oh, thank you.
You're welcome. I was like, wow.
I'm 60.
You did say that just this morning.
I was like, I must be
50. And my wife was 50. That's my second wife. My first wife was Michelle. My second wife's Michelle. So there you go.
There you go. Yeah.
So my second wife.
Consistency.
That's right, consistency. So Michelle was 50 last year. Oh, should I say that? I don't know. Anyway, we had a discussion about a few things, and we decided we wanted to have a decent holiday. Our son James is 19. We thought, okay, he's probably old enough to leave him for a period. So we booked a 9-week holiday, which we head off on Sunday for Vietnam, Thailand and Indonesia. And as part of my reflection, I decided I'd had enough of recruitment training. It had been great. It had given me a great financial foundation. I'd enjoyed it, but I was enjoying my writing much more. So I decided to cease training. And as you both know, Shortlist ceased publishing February last year. And there's been this gap. And I've been umming and ahhing about Substack for quite a while. And in the end, I just decided, well, I won't know unless I try. So I launched my paid Substack last week.
Yeah.
And people have got the option of subscribing and paying and getting everything. So now it's 2 news releases a week and a blog a week as a minimum. And then if you are a free subscriber, you get 2 free posts a month. So I've had already, I think I've got 20 paid subscriptions in the first week, so I'm pretty happy with that.
Great.
And hopefully, because I'm about to go away and I've told people my output's going to be reduced, so naturally enough, people are probably going to wait till I get back. But so far so good, and I feel optimistic that I can make, hopefully a majority of my earnings through my paid Substack.
And Recruitment News, the podcast will continue?
Absolutely. Continue exactly the same. It'll still be free, still coming out on a Tuesday, and that at this stage, Adele and I are, we've got a sponsor, and hopefully they'll continue next year. Otherwise, we've got a couple of other people we're talking to. So at this point, that'll continue exactly as it is.
And so I guess if you want to even just share a little bit more around the paid subscription for anyone listening who, you've still got the free podcast, as you just mentioned, a couple of free posts a month. What are they going to get? This is your sales pitch.
Yes. So because, as you would both know, I've got summaries of news items in what was in the Insight newsletter. So there'll be 5 or 6 summary items in 2 news posts every week. So people will get 10 to 12. So this is a minimum, because now I'm devoting more time. There might be more. And they'll still get my blog. But what I'm going to do is, because I've got more time, I'll be doing more in-depth pieces, writing more investigative pieces. And although, of course, they haven't been produced yet, what I hope is that people will go, oh, it's clear now, however good we thought Ross was before and however much we enjoyed it, that there's now another level. So when they go to commit to another subscription for another year. They'll go, well, this is an easy decision. So that's really what I'm aiming for. More of the same, but better, basically.
Yeah. Because where else do you get this
Well, that's
level of
right.
information? Like I think to your point, there is certainly a gap. People do look to you now. So
Well, it's sad when you think back sort of 20 years ago. The RCSA produced a monthly magazine. We had Recruitment Extra and we had Shortlist.
Yes.
And now we've got none of those. There's only really my blog. The RCSA have a newsletter via email, but it's not the same.
Yeah.
It's much lighter, which is by design. And so it's kind of ridiculous. Our industry's doubled or maybe tripled in size in the last 20 years, and the news sources have shrunk.
Yeah.
And I'm kind of the last person left standing.
Thank goodness that you're going to step up and fill the gap, though.
Well, hopefully I'll get the support. I mean, I've got a goal to get to 200 paid subscribers by this time next year, so we'll see.
Yeah, I'm sure you'll get
absolutely.
there. Absolutely.
I hope so.
Yeah.
Charities.
Yeah. So Ross, you mentioned on your website you're quite close to a couple of charities. With this episode, CMR will make a donation to a charity of your choice. Where can you raise some awareness for today and why are they important to you?
Well, there's been 3 that have been long-term charities that I've supported. So firstly, Smith Family. So I'm very passionate about improving educational outcomes for people who have some form of disadvantage. And I recruited for the Smith family when I was in Sydney. So I got to know the Smith family in the 90s. And so I became a Learning for Life sponsor. Wouldn't be 30 years ago, it'd be something around 25 to 30 years ago. And so I sponsor 4 students every year, and we receive student updates in terms of the progress that they're making. So that's something I feel very strongly about. I used to be a surf lifesaver at Narrabeen Beach in Sydney, so I support Lifesaving Australia. So I've been donating to them for a couple of decades, I'd say. And my major charity is the Mother's Day Classic, and the Mother's Day Classic is an event on Mother's Day each year, and it raises money for breast cancer research and now ovarian cancer research. And the origins of that, my sister Mary died of breast cancer in 2012, the age of 44, when her son was 5 and her daughter was just turned 4. And obviously that was devastating for our family. And so as someone who wants to do something, I decided the best thing was to raise money. So every year, as you both know, with my subscriber base, I send out an appeal, and I've had fantastic support. So over the, I think, 17 campaigns, I've raised now, I think it's $188,000. So I'm the second highest all-time fundraiser for the Mother's Day Classic, and that's something I'm very proud of. And I'm very involved in the event as well. And the fundraising amount for this year will be announced at an event next week. So sadly, I'll be away, but Guy, my eldest son, will be there to hear the amount. So I'm pretty hopeful it'll be another $2 million tipped into research for breast cancer and ovarian cancer.
You've certainly raised awareness for that over the recent years. We see that every year come round.
Yeah, and devastatingly, on Monday, it would have been the 61st birthday of a friend of mine who died of breast cancer 2 years ago at the age of 59. So, yeah, and one of the original staff members of People to People. So Mark Mander, Simon Gregg were the founding shareholders of that business, and Mark Mander and Simon worked with me at Recruitment Solutions when Greg was the director. And one of the original employees died of breast cancer a few years ago. So, the older I get, the more I hear these stories, and the more it makes me determined to do what I can. And let's face it, money's what makes the difference. That's how you pay for research, and that's what makes a difference.
Ross, when we're all getting to these milestone birthdays, when you look back, on your life, what do you hope people would see your legacy as being? You've done so much and contributed in so many different ways. What do you hope you're known for?
That I tried to make things and people better around me. Like, really, you look at the money I put into those charities to try and make those, or help those charities be more effective in my coaching and training, help people be more effective at work. I'd like to think as a father that I've helped my children get to whatever point they are that has them be happy. So, I think as a human, that's kind of what you want at your core, isn't it? To try and have an impact and make the world around you better. So, I think that's probably how I'd like people to think about me. And because, you can't take it with you, but if you leave a little piece of you inside people that helps them be better, well, what could be better than that?
Ross, thank you so much for your time today. I like sitting here hearing you speak. What you just said is how I would have described you. You are so impactful in even just the littlest conversation and a moment that someone has with you. You have such impact. Every single part of your life has been woven together to land where you are. And I think to have you take a moment now and stop and go, right, what's the next chapter look like and how can I have even more impact, just is such a testament to who you are. And the industry is just so lucky to have people like you still contributing, still participating, and we are just so grateful to have. It's not a 20-minute podcast. I'm so sorry. We're going to chop this up into a couple. But to just have that time with you and share your journey is something that we'll be forever grateful for, and it's definitely had an impact on us. And I'm sure anyone who listens will be really impacted by not just today, but all the work you've done. So thank you.
Well, thanks. I've certainly been impacted by a lot of people who've contributed to me, and I've mentioned quite a few of them today. So I just like to think I'm playing it forward.
Awesome. Thanks, Ross.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Thanks, Kate.